then we now go to subjects and objects of international law. We'll try to simplify this, okay? So, of course, what is this discussion on subject? So, of course, we have to understand first what's the international community. So, the international community may be described as a body of juridical entities which are governed by international law. It is often and traditionally called the family of nations. However, it is not really composed only of nations or states, but there are also other entities besides states which are now considered subjects of international law. Okay? So, of course, we have now to distinguish what is a subject and object of international law. So, a subject of international is an entity that has rights and responsibilities under that law. It has an international personality in that it can directly assert rights and be held directly responsible under the law of nations. In other words, it has the faculty of motivation. By this, it is meant that it can be a proper party in transactions involving the application of the law of nations among members of the international community. In contrast, an object of international law is the person or thing with respect of which rights are held and obligations assumed by the subject. It is therefore not directly governed by the rules of international law. Its rights are asserted and its responsibilities imposed indirectly through the instrumentality of an intermediate agency, which is the subject. Okay. Now, of course, the question now is who are subjects of international law? So, of course, obviously, one subject of the one that can be considered as a subject of international law is states. States, of course, and even for centuries, states are held to be only subjects of international law, save perhaps for a few oddities like as of this date, of course, we still have Vatican City or the Holy See that is considered as a state, even if it does not comply with population requirement and all of those other requirements for a state to exist. Okay, because remember, a state has four elements. If you can recall, you have people, territory, government, and sovereignty. Of course, with respect to Vatican City or the Holy See, it's just limited to 1,000 individuals, the Roman Curia, okay? Of course, when it comes to population, it does not comply with the population requirements of a state. But because of these peculiarities, the Vatican City was considered as a state for purposes of diplomatic relations. And I think it's clear with the Lateran Treaty of 1929. If I can recall, this is the treaty that particularly and formally established Vatican City as a state. Okay, all right. Then aside from states, we have intergovernmental organizations. So, of course, especially after the advent of even after the First World War, we have this League of Nations and of course other establishments like, for example, the Philippine Court of the Permanent Court of Arbitration, the permanent international court, the predecessor of your ICJ with the League of Nations. Of course, the League of Nations itself. But the problem was the League of Nations was not that compared to the UN, they do not have any teeth or have persuasive effect. That, of course, it was inevitable that the League of Nations would collapse. And well, before its collapse, of course, World War II erupted. Now, it is because of this of World War II that the need to have an international organization of all nations crystallized, di ba? So nagsimula, if you can recall your history, nagkaroon ng Dumbarton Oaks Conference, then nagkaroon ng Yalta Conference, eventually forming the United Nations. So, of course, the United Nations is an international organization. Of course, aside from the UN, we have the European Union, we have the International Monetary Fund. These are, while most of them are under the UN, of course, they have their separate personalities that they could be considered as subjects of international law. Okay? Alright, then, of course, we now go to this traditional view. Okay, so, what do we mean? Okay, so, now, we are discussing this. So, these are subjects of international. So, what about persons? Are they a subject or an object of international law? Of course, we have these views on persons. So, we have this traditional view. Of course, the traditional view is individuals are objects of international law. So, for centuries, international law did not think of individuals in other as than a highly abstract sense. Individuals are citizens of states. International was the law between the states, and that was it. So individuals, so the phrase went, were objects of international law but are not subjects. They are not considered to be capable of bearing rights and obligations under international law. And of course, traditional concept regards the individual as an object of international who can act only through the instrumentality of its own state in matters involving relations with other states. So for example, if he's injured, for example, to a wrong imputable to a foreign jurisdiction, he can secure redress under international only through the assistance and representation of his own state and not otherwise. So in theory, it is his state whose right, i.e. his right to have its nationals respected, has been violated. Okay, so hence it is the state and not the individual which can be a proper party in the assertion of an international claim of damages. So how are we going to exemplify this? So for example, I think you have heard the reports on fishermen being harassed by Chinese while they are fishing in the West Philippine Sea. Okay, of course the question is, let's say there was an harassment, there was injuries that were inflicted by the Chinese Coast Guard. Can those fishermen file a case before the courts here, impleading the Chinese fishermen as to any suit, be it damages, a damage suit, or a criminal case? The answer there is no, because you cannot sue them. You cannot sue the Chinese Coast Guard. You cannot even sue the individual Chinese Coast Guards there. Because, or conversely, the fishermen being individuals, being persons, they are just mere objects of international law. So they cannot maintain a suit against the Chinese Coast Guard or those perpetrators. But what is the redress of that? The redress of that is you have to go to the DFA. You have to go to the DFA. You convince the DFA to file a diplomatic protest, because that would be a claim of the Philippines against China for such violations that are being committed against Filipino fishermen, diba? So that's the example of your of how are you going to interpret this as objects of international law. Later on, we have to relate also the subject of this object of international law traditional view with respect to the concept of state responsibility, because of course there is already a draft rule on state responsibility, but the subject vis-a-vis object of international law is significant in your state responsibility, because for example, if there is a state has a terror, it has a terror group, okay? Now, before 9/11, if there would be example, someone kidnap you, or there is an action against another national, you cannot file a criminal case right away if it's done by an organization, example, a terrorist group. Of course, you can. The point is, the one who's going to be responsible are the actors itself. Like example, the terrorist group. For example, Abu Sayyaf. Okay, let's quantify it in a local sense. Let's say Abu Sayyaf. Okay, Abu Sayyaf, they tend to kidnap, they even behead foreigners. Okay. Insofar as liability is concerned, of course, if there would be any crime imputable, it's against the Abu Sayyaf, because they're the ones perpetrating the acts, the overt acts of terrorism or kidnapping or other illegal deeds. Okay. But the next question is, let's say a U.S. national was kidnapped by the Abu Sayyaf. Can you file a case against the Philippines because the Philippines was negligent in not taking care of their citizen while here in the Philippines? The answer there is no, because that is not included in this concept of state responsibility. It should any act that can be considered as within the purview of state responsibility should be acts with which the state is directly involved. So if it's just a bandit within the territory or a terrorist group, you cannot just automatically claim that the country is liable. Now, there are now because of the new provisions on state responsibility, there's already some modifications that, for example, if there is really a direct link to the terrorism made by the terrorist as to vis-a-vis the state, diba? If you can have that, if you can prove the causal connection between the state, it's possible that the state may be liable at that particular instance. But under this traditional view, you cannot mix, or you cannot confuse or you cannot commingle all of those rights of an object and a subject. Yun yung sinasabi sa traditional point, okay? Then of course we have now the modern view. Actually, the modern view is, of course, individuals can be subjects of international law. But note that most of these views on individuals as subjects of international law, this pertain to human rights. You would observe this involves international human rights law or international humanitarian law. Okay? So, why? Of course, we have direct rights arising from treaty consideration. So, of course, if there are treaty, of course, this is initially before there was this before IHL was that crystallized. Of course, treaties would ask for reparation. So, that's part of that individuals as subjects. So, syempre, kailangan maibigay, di ba? Then, of course, there is this crystallization of human rights law and international humanitarian law. Okay? So, of course, di ba, nagkaroon Geneva Convention. So, this pertains to the conduct and laws of war. What are you going to do not only to combatants, not only to how war should be conducted, you should also consider those who are non-combatants. Di ba? So, kailangan mong i-secure lahat ng mga horde combat, yung mga lahat ng mga refugees, all of those. You should take that into consideration because there is already this human-based approach in the application of the law. Okay, then of course, most of the wartime international tribunals, if you recall the Nuremberg trials, yung trial ni Yamashita, and more recently yung International Court Tribunal sa Yugoslavia at saka sa Rwanda, trying war criminals. Of course, this is with respect to providing justice against people who were victims of genocide or other high crimes arising from war. Okay, but let's think of something which is of basic practice. So let's go back to the discussion on Binuya versus Romulo. Note that in Binuya versus Romulo, we have the Malaya Lolas. This is a group of comfort women. Of course, they had this decision in Binuya, which, well, the case was dismissed against them. Okay, so what did the Malaya Lolas do? Okay, what they did was they went to the UN, particularly they went to CEDAW. So what is CEDAW? So CEDAW is the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. Since these are comfort women, it's appropriate that they went to CEDAW. Okay. So of course, what they did with CEDAW was they filed a communication questioning the decision of the Philippines in refusing them to be given reparations. Okay. Look at how the procedure is made there. Sino nag-file ng kaso? Diba, the one that filed that case was the Malaya Lolas. Did they ask for state intervention? No. They filed it by themselves. They were represented by counsel to file that petition. Diba? So of course the respondent is the Philippines. Okay? So if you look at the caption of the case, it's the Malaya Lolas versus the Philippines. So that in itself, it shows that a person, particularly that group, that Malaya Lolas, were able to file a case. So practically, you can consider them now as a subject because if you look at your ICJs, your ICJ decisions or titles of the decisions, it's either ICJ or even the Permanent Court of Arbitration or even in UNCLOS or ITLOS, it's always nation versus nation. But here in CEDAW, since this involves something involving women discrimination as well as human rights, okay, the Malaya Lolas can be a direct participant. He is not just a mere object of international law. He can now be a subject of international law. Okay? So, yun yung nangyari, di ba? Nag-file sila. Then, of course, the Malaya Lolas got a favorable recommendation before the CIDAW. So, the CIDAW asked the Philippines to rectify certain things or certain matters in order for them to be redressed of their grievances. Okay? So yun yung modern view ng international law. Okay? So all right. So there are a lot of cases here, okay? So I think more of the cases that I discussed. So for example, of course, Binuya versus Romulo. Of course, that the case before the ICTY or the International Court Tribunal for USIG is the case of prosecutor versus Tajic. Okay, so of course it was held there that would be a travesty of law and a betrayal of the universal need of justice should the concept of state sovereignty be allowed to be raised successfully against human rights. Borders should not be considered as a shield against the reach of law and as a protection for those who trample underfoot the most elementary rights of humanity. Indeed, where an international tribunal such as the present one is created, it must be endowed with primacy over national courts. So otherwise, human nature being what it is, would there be a perennial danger of international being characterized as ordinary crimes or proceedings being designed to shield the accused or cases not being diligently prosecuted. Okay? Alright, so I think I have given a very much basic concept with regards to subjects and objects of international law. Okay?